I am going to read this article real quick called The Death Trap and How to Avoid It. This was emailed to me by a friend, and I've not finished the whole thing, but I've read part of it. And this is written by Penre, and he has several things. I think he has a book called The Penre Papers. I don't know if he's channeled this information or what, but I do resonate with a lot of the stuff of his that I've seen. So I thought I'd share this. Here we go. Article number 2, The Death Trap and How to Avoid It. In the Penre Papers, as well as in my ebook, Synthetic Superintelligence and the Transmutation of Humankind, a Roadmap to the Singularity, I wrote about what normally happens after a person dies and leaves his or her third-dimensional human body. I argued that the afterlife is just another aspect of the frequency prison in which we are contained. The afterlife, I wrote, is just an intermediary station where souls can rest until they are recycled, reincarnated into a new life on Earth. I also suggested that what we could do to avoid this afterlife trap and break out of the frequency prison in which we are trapped as if we are criminals when we didn't commit any crime in the first place. Because of the importance of this information, I am writing this article in an effort to summarize these concepts and to make it more available in one place. Some background. As spiritual beings, we were seduced and manipulated into entering these physical and dense vessels that we are calling human bodies a very long time ago. And by doing so, we were trapped in this limited frequency band we call the third dimension. See above references to other parts of my work for more details. Once locked into this frequency, we got stuck in a hologram created by an extraterrestrial group which most people currently call the Anunnaki, but whom I will call the Alien Invader Force, AIF, or the Overlords in this article. This ET group is controlled by a being ancient Sumerian texts called Enki, who is the entity behind the Lucifer archetype. Okay. This hologram consists of everything we can perceive with our 5 senses, and therefore includes the entire known universe. It would be correct to say that everything that is made of atoms is part of this hologram, which is a distortion and is only a small part of what would be considered the real universe. It is estimated that we currently only use a few percent of our brain capacity, we only use a few percent of our DNA's connectivity to creation, and that we can only perceive about 4% of the entire universe. In fact, even these 4% are compromised because they are overlapped by a hologram, which is a partial copy of a partially real universe. This copy or hologram is presented to humans as an entire universe of its own with planets, stars, nebulae, and galaxies, etc. It's very convincing. In addition to our concept of the third dimension, 3D, these ET manipulators have also constructed the astral plane, which consists of a number of different dimensions and densities of its own. However, it is only a virtual reality or a software program similar to what was presented to us in the Matrix series movies. The real universe is the universe we cannot experience while living in this hologram. The only hint of its existence is what we call dark energy and dark matter, which together consists of about 96% of the universe. The other 4% is the hologram in which we are currently trapped. If this hologram were to disappear, we would once again be able to perceive the 100% universe just as we did before we were trapped. It has been there all the time, although we currently only perceive it as dark space. Difference between spirit, soul, mind, and body. This can be very confusing matter and needs a section of its own, but I'll do my best to explain how I'm using these different concepts in my writing. I will start off with the divine feminine and take it from there. This is how I see it. The divine feminine. The divine feminine is my term for what others call God of everything, source, first source, the goddess, or all that is. I am convinced that the universe is feminine in nature, and therefore I call the first creatrix the divine feminine. She exists outside any universe, but is also present in everything, in all universes, in a multiverse of universes. The divine feminine lives in us all, in everything that exists. And as explained in the Penre Papers, the second level of learning, the divine feminine is not energy. She is not thought. She is nothingness and somethingness simultaneously. She just is. She needs to step down a level in order to become a separate individual in any universe. And when she is there, she starts creating with her consciousness. The goddess's first creation, the universes. The divine feminine, the goddess, was aware that she was all-knowing, and therefore she wanted to create situations of not knowing in order to experience herself from different perspectives, dimensions, densities, viewpoints. Therefore she devoted herself to the first creation, a divine virgin birthing, which was the creation of universes, with each universe having its own characteristics. Thus, she created a series of universes, as explained in the West Penre papers, the second level of learning. These universes were intended to work as templates, created in the KHAA void of nothingness. This was the first creation. Now, she needed parts of herself that were acting individually and independently, so the goddess could learn and experience more about herself and thus expand. Well, what's KHAA? I don't know. I never have figured that out. The goddess's second creation, spirit. What I call spirit is the second creation of the divine feminine. Into these templates we call universes. She then sent out spirits who were extensions of herself, and therefore these spirits can't be anything but herself and are always connected to her. We could picture this as if the goddess suddenly sent out extended arms where each arm was doing its own thing. However, each arm is connected to the divine body and is thus part of the divine feminine at all times. The number of spirits in these universes are almost infinite. We usually call the spirits oversouls. The goddess's third creation, fire composite or soul splinter, fire or soul for short. Thus, the divine feminine decided to explore more dimensions of herself, so she created different universes in the KHAA. I guess this is the void. When the basic templates for these universes were created, she sent out extensions of herself, parts of her spiritual body, and told these extensions, spirits or oversouls, to go out and create. These spirits were free to create whatever they wanted, but certain rules applied. The most important rule in our spiritual universe is the law of free will, which basically means that all spirits have the right to go out and explore and create whatever they want, but all spirits are responsible for their creations, and their experiences are reported back to the divine feminine so she can learn from her own experiences via these smaller fractions of herself. In order for spirit to operate in the different universes, they needed to split themselves into smaller fractions as forms of energy because the universes are operating through energy. Thus, fire composites, fire or soul splinters, souls, same thing as fire, were created from extensions of spirit. The fire/souls can be pictured as the fingers of the extended arms, spirit. It's the fingers who can feel and perceive the environment and also create in it. In the physical body, in this analogy, the nervous system sends signals back to the arm, spirit, and further back to the brain, the divine feminine. The spirit then becomes the oversoul for her many fractions of soul splinters spread out across the universe in which the spirit operates. Thus, more and more splinters from more and more spirits extend from the oversoul and spread themselves across their universe to create, either alone or in groups. Each fire soul consists of a fire composite, which is a myriad of small fires, smaller spirit fragments, grouped together into one individual being or individual composite. With these fires, the individual can then form an avatar, a body to operate in across the universe. Usually, a fire composite is created from stardust, therefore fire, and the fire composites are usually created in soul groups, thus star races and star beings. Stars are inhabited depending on which dimension we are addressing. Stars are many different things depending on dimension. The stars themselves are sentient beings. These soul groups or star races made up of energy or fire often take the same shape when it comes to avatars, which is similar to the way all humans look alike, and therefore we see different kinds of beings in the KHAA depending on which soul group or star race that they belong to and the energy signature they transmit, although each fire composite also has her own signature. Each fire composite can shapeshift by remodeling her fire composite into different shapes and forms if needed and wanted. This is what we call shapeshifting. The fire, after having stepped down from the main body of spirit, creates her own mind or consciousness from learning experiences. However, the difference between the mind of the original fire composites in the KHAA and the soul mind consciousness we humans currently possess in the physical universe is that the former remembers what she has learned because there is no real death in the spiritual universe, with an exception that I will explain below. At this point, the law of non-interference was created. This law means that no one outside of a newborn soul group is allowed to interfere with the soul group's evolution and learning process while a particular star race is evolving to a similar level as another star race. Then interaction can take place. Some newborn star races continue living in their star or sun or out in space. I am referring to space not being dark as it is with our limited perceptions. More about this later. It's rare that star races or star beings live on planets. This is something that is quite restricted to the holographic universe we live in now. Planets are normally used for other things. Living on a planet was an experiment created by the Queen of the Stars, a first spirit of the Divine Feminine, in order to explore if star beings could live on a beautifully created planet and still be able to travel across the dimensions with thoughts as all other star beings do. Moreover, living on a planet can sometimes be more challenging than otherwise desired, and the Queen wanted to find out if such beings, whom I'll call the Nam Lulu, the primordial spiritual womankind, could still do this and contain their level of compassion. No death was included in her divine experiment that was taking place in the KHAA. Before that, living on planets was not something star beings did in general. It was a new idea. The human soul group was created specifically for this experiment, and this soul group was very dear and important to the Queen. She gave these souls freedom to create and a promise to return to the Orion Empire, of which she is the queen with no strings attached. This human soul group is, of course, us, Earth humans. A fire composite in the KHAA usually splits herself again and thus creates copies of herself as she goes along in order to be able to explore and create even more, but also to protect herself in case one of the soul fragments would be annihilated in a war or by a malevolent being. Here on Earth, we do a similar thing. It is true that each individual here on Earth reincarnates over and over across the lines of time, but each soul of the human soul group is also split into other parts of herself, who also reincarnate again and again and have their own experiences throughout what we call time. The difference between the fire splinters of the spiritual universe, the KHAA, okay, so the spiritual universe is the KHAA, and soul splinters in the physical universe is that the former always know where another fire composite splinter is and what she does. They are interconnected as one being. Here on Earth, we have death and amnesia. Therefore, one splinter of oneself is not aware of another, and therefore each splinter develops differently into different personalities based on the individual experiences each splinter has. It's done this way with the purpose to create more separation. Wars in the KHAA. If a war would start somewhere in the KHAA, and it occasionally does, and weapons are used to destroy a fire or avatar from the enemy side, this particular fire composite could be annihilated in the sense that the fire fragments of the targeted being will be scattered and separated from each other. If this happens, these small fire fragments that made up that being cannot reunite again and will therefore return to the main body of the Divine Feminine and merge with her again, becoming one with her, part of the brain in the above analogy. However, this doesn't mean that the particular individual fire composite dies and is gone forever. Each fire composite has her counterpart somewhere else in the universe from splitting herself as described above. These splinters of the fire composite live on and are of the same individual as the one who got annihilated. This may be difficult to comprehend for many, and if this is unclear, I suggest the reader goes through this material several times until an aha moment occurs. Why does a soldier want to annihilate a fire composite if that individual lives on somewhere else? In wars, it's usually a matter of conquest or to safeguard some interests, or it's a fight over real estate, constellations, star systems, or planets. By eliminating the enemy that stands in the way of obtaining a goal, one side gains advantages over the other, and the fire composite who is annihilated loses the position she had while still being that particular composite, which can be unfortunate. It's similar to when a king gets overthrown by a mob. He loses his position and usually has a difficult time regaining it. In the KHAA, it's the same thing when a soul is annihilated, but the difference is that the same personality lives on elsewhere in the KHAA, in one or more splinters that are copies of each other, for lack of a better word. The human soul group. Here on Earth, we consist of the same template as in the KHAA, i.e., a fire composite or fire avatar, but we also have a physical body, which most people think is very important. Regardless, the fact remains that without a physical body, we can't live on Earth. Religions around the world usually teach us that we are spirit or soul within a physical body, i.e., the soul and the body are separate, and when the body gets old or sick, it ceases to function, a state we call death. Then we notice that we continue to live on in the astral dimensions after body death. We think that it's the soul who lives on, and that this soul is the ultimate you, the personality. This is not so. Humans have forgotten who they are and who they are connected to, the divine feminine through spirit oversoul. They believe in a God archetype who rules the world with his principles, often with firm rules, overseeing everything and judging everything. Many also believe that the soul and mind are separate, thinking that the mind is the brain of the physical body and the brain being the thinking unit. People have forgotten that they are spirit, mind, and body in one basic unit. The mind is, of course, not the brain. The brain is the control center in the body, the computer control room, if you like. Here we store memories and experiences that we have in our physical bodies, and those experiences are then transferred into the soul or mind, the fire avatar or light body. Not until we die and notice that the soul lives on do we understand that the soul is the thinking unit. We realize that the brain is not the thinking unit. We also realize that the soul and mind are one and the same. Moreover, we notice that we have a soul body or a light body, as we often call it. We can shape our light body any way we want. Most discarnate souls shape it in a way that the individual looked like while being his or her most desirable age in the last lifetime. The light body is essentially our avatar, i.e., the myriad of fire or soul that makes up our avatar light body. However, the alien force, I can't remember the I, is controlling our avatar as well through the chakra system and our energetic electromagnetic field, which is tied to the grid being, for the most part, built by our own human mass consciousness existing within the technology-controlled frequency band we call 3D. This creates a false astral body, which can only function in the astral dimensions, which are part of the physical universe hologram. While stuck in the astral body, we could look at it as an overlay of the avatar or light body. We cannot leave the astral dimensions and accidentally return to the KHAA dimensions. We will discuss this in more details later in this article. Spirit, soul, mind, fire, light body are one and the same in one basic unit. There is no separation. However, in this realm of existence, 3D, we believe that our real bodies are the physical bodies, which obviously are separate from us. Thus, the overlords created separation for the first time when they manipulated the whole human soul group into entering Enki's genetically manipulated solid bodies made of atoms. This is where the separation comes from, and it expresses itself in dualism, opposites, yin and yang, karma and polarity, black, white, good, evil, light, dark, etc. Here on Earth, we build our personality lifetime after lifetime based on our upbringing and what we learn in society and outside society. Experiences accumulate and form our personality. This personality then separates from the physical body at death, but continues to live in a new body in a new incarnation over and over. The experiences from one lifetime passes over to the next, though the soul does not remember because of amnesia implants placed in the physical body and in the astral body by the alien invader force. All these experiences across the lines of time are stored in our fire as memories, and so are the experiences of the genetic line, which is the RNA and DNA timeline of the body we possess in any given lifetime. Because of amnesia, this can become very confusing to the person. Often, events from previous lives of the soul, previous lives in the genetic line overlap, and unwittingly the individual may experience unexplained pain, trauma, or even epiphanies that originate from previous lives. All this forms the personality of the particular soul splinter that we consider being us in this lifetime. The real you is all this, but it is so much more. Take your current personality and add infinite opportunities to that, and you'll have the you as a fire composite that you will operate from in the KHAA. Your entire current personality remains as a series of experiences, all in a simultaneous packet. This is the way that I look at it. It may take some processing and inner meditation to really grasp this concept and to see whether it applies to you. On Earth, our neural pathways are normally not yet fully connected so as to comprehend these subject matters, but with new learning, new neural pathways are created, and dormant parts of our DNA start to light up. We evolve to a new level. It's important to realize that what you call your consciousness is not you either. It is the energy signature of your spirit and is working through her soul, created by experiences. The fire composite that you consider being you, but it is not you. The spirit/oversoul is the unit that is really you. The soul/fire is your vehicle, which you are using in the universe after having stepped down in its vibratory rate and become energy, so that you can create in a construct called the universe. Therefore, we could call the original universe a hologram too, although it is a hologram of which we usually are aware and can freely create in, as opposed to a hologram in which we are trapped. It was created with the purpose of enslaving souls. Our fire/soul/consciousness is what we use to create in this or any other universe. The creation process is then registered in spirit and in the divine feminine. When we are trapped here in the 4% physical universe, we have very little connection with our higher self, spirit, or oversoul because of the electronic obstacles that have been created as barriers between the soul and spirit. It is when we are first leaving this trap that we unite with our oversoul, and from there on we are always connected and very much aware of the connection. There is, when the soul is free, a constant communication between soul and spirit. We will all remain individuals creating our own realities with thought, but fully aware that we are all connected. Today, people who are waking up feel that their awareness and their consciousness has increased, and indeed they have. What happens is that the soul that is you in this reality is beginning to break down the amnesia barriers in your DNA and in your soul, and you vaguely remember your past in the KHAA as a Namlulu, and the part of your existence as a soul that was not manipulated. You were living in the spiritual universe with a direct connection with spirit and the divine feminine. In the extension, we also begin to connect with spirit or oversoul, and this creates epiphanies, strange experiences, knowingness, without any substance to it in this reality, intuition, telepathic abilities, ESP, psychic abilities in general, and much more. A person who experiences any or all of the above is to that extent reconnected with the KHAA. My hope is that you, the reader of this article, is prepared enough to be able to create an exit for yourself. This is basically the purpose of the West Penre papers and everything I've written after that. There is certainly information we all need in order to grasp what kind of reality we are living in. Once that is fairly well understood, you will be able to comprehend this article and to implement the information herein. If you're with me so far, you are most likely vibrating on a higher level than the limited frequency band we call the third dimension. Thus, you will have the opportunity to exit this reality and return to the universe in which you belong. It is time to go home. In my opinion, there is an urgency when it comes to learning about or remembering these things. In my book, Synthetic Superintelligence and the Transmutation of Humankind, A Roadmap to the Singularity, I disclose the artificial intelligence AI agenda and its first big goal, the singularity. I doubt that anyone who is reading this article wants to be part of the singularity. Therefore, it's imminent that we learn how to exit the frequency prison before we once again end up in the death trap. There has been much discussion about an alien invasion and the return of the gods, but it seems to me, when looking at it in perspective, the alien invasion is the singularity, and that is when the gods will return. This is just my own hypothesis, but in all this, it's what makes the most sense. The alien invader force controlled artificial intelligence with its goal, the singularity, is the alien invasion that people have predicted, and in that same breath, the gods will return, shortly before the singularity or shortly after, and there is nothing fake about this invasion. The death trap. What usually happens when we die is that spirit guides, who are more often than not alien invader force in disguise, escort us to where in the astral we are supposed to go. Where we end up depends on our beliefs. If we believe in Jesus and heaven, we are most likely to be transported into such frequency band in the astral plane. We will mingle with like-minded, and there might even be a God there, and Jesus might sit by his side. It's all virtual realities within virtual realities, and we help creating these realities with our beliefs, which form the energy we transmit and receive. Therefore, someone who believes in Krishna will likely end up in a dimension within the hologram containing a Hindu belief system. The afterlife often begins with a tunnel of light, through which the discarnate soul, mind, light body travels to her destination. At the end of the tunnel, an appropriate being greets the soul. This being could be Jesus or Krishna or simply a loved one who has passed away earlier. These beings, persons, are often just projections created by the alien invader force to pull the soul into a certain container or astral dimension. The alien invader force knows whom to project because they have the technology to scan the soul before or at the death moment for memories and experiences. These memories and experiences are then used to give the soul a life review, where she will re-experience the most recent lifetime in a matter of seconds or minutes measured in Earth time. The soul is then encouraged to examine this life experience and compare the good and not so good things she did during her previous lifetime. Subsequently, she discusses with her spirit guide what she needs to improve, and the soul will then feel a certain amount of guilt for the bad things she did to herself or others, or what she neglected to do for other people while she was incarnated. The spirit guide then suggests that the soul returns to Earth to remedy these flaws. In order to create balance, the spirit guide will tell the soul that in the next incarnation, it is a good idea to experience the other side of the coin, i.e., if the soul was abusive to others in the previous life, it's a good idea to become the abused in the next lifetime, to experience the matter from the other person's perspective. This is where the idea of karma comes into play. It is a term and a phenomenon invented by the alien invader force with the purpose of having the soul reincarnate willingly under a strict set of rules. It should also be mentioned that in some instances, a discarnate soul is recycled immediately after the recent body has expired. This soul goes through the tunnel as well, but in these cases, the tunnel just leads back to Earth again as the soul is shot into a new body. She has no choice in the matter. The adventures in the afterlife trap are fairly well described by author and researcher Dr. Michael Newton, who wrote a series of books on the subject after having put more than 7,000 subjects into regression therapy, where the subjects were telling similar stories of what happens between lives. His best book, in my opinion, is Destiny of Souls. A synopsis of this book can be found by using this link to one of my papers, West Penre, March 25th, 2011, Metaphysics, paper number 4, There is Light at the End of the Tunnel, What Happens After Body Death. Regardless if she is vibrating on a frequency that is equivalent to the Christian heaven and Islamic heaven in hell or elsewhere, this between lives zone is just a temporary abode. The soul will eventually be brought into a control room in the astral with the assistance from advanced technology. The soul will be beamed back to the earth plane and will hover around the pregnant woman who is to become his or her mother, and at the point during the pregnancy, the soul enters the body, upon which a new lifetime begins. This describes the death trap in a nutshell. This soul recycling process has been practiced here for millennia, and each time we enter a new body, we do this with artificially induced amnesia caused by the alien invader force. Thus, we more or less have to relearn what we learned in previous lives. And even though we are not allowed to remember our past lives, traumas, and experiences from other lifetimes and other lines of time affect us in the current incarnation because they are embedded in our soul. As a result, we often don't understand why we act and react the way we do and why we are afraid of certain things and not of others. This makes life on Earth extremely difficult, and the so-called learning lessons are often filled with trauma, guilt, anger, sadness, and other unwanted experiences. This is not how it is supposed to be. It must also be mentioned that our wide range of emotions are also a part of the human experiment in 3D, and thus part of the physical universe experience and our human consciousness. The spirit and oversoul and the soul, when consciously living in the KHAA, does not have the same range of emotions we experience on Earth. This range of emotion was created by the alien Invader force in order to better control us. They use these emotions against us. When we really think about it, what have these strong emotions done to humanity? It has more often than not led to pain and suffering and even more separation. It has led to conflict, jealousy, power struggles, and much more. Yes, we also have the ability to love another person, i.e., another part of ourselves, and we can have physical sex. These are the pleasurable parts of having strong emotions, but the love we feel for each other is still to a large degree selfish love. We give, but we also need. In the KHAA, there is love as well, although it's an entirely different level. It's unconditional in a sense, but it doesn't mean that beings can attack each other and let unconditional love restrain them from acting upon the assault. Things are handled accordingly, but as a rule, as peacefully as possible. Sometimes this is not the option of choice, and a conflict or even a war could emerge. The unconditional love as we see it is on the goddess and the spirit levels, where the divine feminine has unconditional love for all her creations. After all, she said, go out and create whatever you want, but you are responsible for what you create. The alien invader force tells us in the astral, if asked, that we need to have amnesia because time on Earth is linear, which is a construct, and it would be too overwhelming to remember everything. This is nonsense. If we remembered, we could at least have the option to do something about our problems, but those who can't control this system don't want us to be too clever. They keep us here so we can be their slaves and their workforce, not their equals or their superiors. The way it is set up, we don't even know the source of our problems because they often originated in other lifetimes. On the other hand, this 3D experience, instigated by Enki and his cohorts in the AIF, is a trap to begin with. So this previous discussion is basically obsolete. We need a way to break out of the prison, and fortunately, there is a way. There are no atoms in the spiritual universe, although thought is also a construct of sorts, which we are using here in the trap as well. It is a higher level of construct. As soon as we fragment ourselves from the whole, we need to step down at least a little bit in order to be able to operate even in the spiritual universe. Therefore, thought, which is the highest level of operation next to being one with the divine feminine, not fragmented, is what beings in the spiritual universe use to operate. From there come imagination, intention, and manifestation. By transmitting your thoughts to other fire fragments, you can find beings who are willing to co-create with you, and you can create whatever you want. When the creation has fulfilled its purpose, you can uncreate it, also with thought. And as I've mentioned many times before, beings in the KHAA travel from one point of view to another with the speed of thought. This is very difficult to put down in words because it's out of this world. Therefore, what I wrote here is very simplified, but it's the way I've come to understand it. We live in a virtual reality that has become extremely complex, which means that whatever we do here, we humans have a tendency to complicate. Haven't we all heard the expression, keep it simple? That's a very good idea. It might be difficult to wrap our heads around the fact that everything is made of atoms as part of the trap. The easiest way to comprehend this, perhaps, is to compare the atomic universe, the physical universe, with our thoughts. Are our thoughts made of atoms? No. If we create with our thoughts inside our head, are these thoughts made of atoms? No. Thus, if we exist in a void, which is void of atoms, and we create with our thoughts and manifest these thoughts directly into the void, are our manifestations made of atoms? No. It's also kind of like dreaming. However, you can also create illusions the way Enki did. You do so by manipulating spirits in your environment. When Lucifer/Enki did this, it had not been done in such a manner before, apparently. He created bodies of much lower frequencies and implanted a virtual reality into them. Then he seduced spirits to go in there and experience it, similar to how they seduce us to go into the smartphone world today, so beware. Once in that virtual reality, he closed the trap and made us believe that our physical bodies are very important and that they are separate from the spirit/soul/mind. This is how he created separation. Embedded into the physical body was also an astral body that the spirit was manipulated into using when the body expires. Thus, he had control over the spirit fragments even in the afterlife. This astral body, that is not you, feels a loss from separation of the body, and even though she experiences a more exhilarated state of being in the astral, she thinks she needs to get back to a new physical body to become whole again and to live out her karma, something that is also part of the manipulation. Also, the soul feels the urge to return to Earth because Earth was the planet where she originally was assigned her mission. She doesn't remember that this assignment was in the KHAA and not in the physical universe. To be able to create the illusion of the astral dimensions, the dimensions of the physical universe, Enki created the physical universe with all its dimensions from the smallest and up, meaning he created a mini-universe of atoms that built a bigger universe of planets, stars, and galaxies, etc. It was all copycatted from the basic spiritual universe. Enki's atoms become the cornerstones of the physical universe, and advanced technology is holding these atoms in place by keeping them within a certain limited frequency band and vibrations, thus the limitations we experience. The atoms in our bodies vibrate within this limited frequency as well, and so we are trapped, or we are led to think we are. Saturn is a key to keeping the hologram in place in our solar system. Saturn transmits certain sound frequencies that can be heard in NASA videos. It sounds very distorted and dissonant, and it is. We can only hear these sound frequencies within the band of human perception when they are slowed down, i.e., within the frequency band of the trap. Indeed, the frequencies that Saturn and other planets too transmit are the frequencies that help keep the hologram intact. It's all done with advanced ET technology. You can see and hear the slowed down sound waves of Saturn in this video. As a side note, I can imagine that a married couple, for example, who both are aware of the information in this article, might be concerned about whether they will meet each other again in the KHAA, in case one of them dies before the other. In which galaxy might the other partner dwell? Is it like finding a needle in a haystack or worse? Well, putting two and two together, I presume that this will not be a problem. In the KHAA, we are our full potential, and if the husband dies after his spouse, he can call upon the spouse in the KHAA after she dies as well, and the two can reunite. A portal to the home universe. I am fully aware that this is the first time any of us intends to break out of the alien invader prison, and I am aware that it is scary for most people. I would say for all people, although perhaps more so for some than others. Everything that deals with the unknown is frightening to some degree. The same fear hits most of us when we try to induce an out-of-body experience. There is a fear of death. The fear is embedded in our 3D bodies, and therefore we all have it to a certain extent. Also, much of what I am writing about in general can seem scary to many to begin with, but once that fear is overcome, inner calmness and peace replace the fear, and we move to a higher state of consciousness, closer to our real self. The fear mechanisms that are implanted in our bodies by the alien invader force scientists are becoming more and more deactivated, and the DNA that is dormant inside us begins to light up, one strand at a time. Although DNA is also a construct in the physical universe, it is still connected to our consciousness. It is often difficult for researchers to share what they have discovered if the information is negative because they are afraid that people will consider them to be fearmongers. In the past, I used to think that way too, until I took another look at myself and saw that what I had gained from taking part of the so-called negative information, and the gains were quite substantial. If I could gain from it, others can too, I thought. We all just need to go through various stages of emotions, including anger, before we reach the other side and stop being reactive to things and replace our reactivity with inner peace, something that happens automatically over time. We urgently need to know both the negative and the positive sides of things, or we'll only know half of the story. We also live in a construct of polarity, so we can't exclude one polarity in favor of another. When it comes to exiting the death trap, we don't need to be afraid. After all, we have died thousands of times already, so that's nothing new. The only thing that's new is that this time we want to try something outside the norm. This time we have an opportunity we've never had before because the grid that surrounds our planet is no longer intact, primarily because there are some of us humans who have raised our consciousness to a level where where we partly vibrate outside the limited frequency band we call the third dimension. Thus, there are now holes in the grid that act like portals leading straight out of the frequency prison. The grid now looks more like Swiss cheese than an intact electromagnetic field. As much as things appear to be more dire now than perhaps ever before on our planet, the opposite polarity is also true. We have a small window where we can finally exit. The global elite, who I call the controllers, ET hybrids in the highest level positions, unknown to regular people, and the minions, humans who have some knowledge of the real agenda and work for the controllers and the overlords, know about this. And of course, so do the overlords. The logical question would be, why don't the overlords repair the damage by simply eliminating us, after which the grid might go back to being more or less intact? There are many reasons for that, and here are a few of them. Even if they would kill all of the millions of people who are waking up, they would only kill our bodies. We are still part of the 3D hologram after body death, and our consciousness level remains, and so do the holes in the grid. The overlords can decide to annihilate the soul-mind-light-body complex as explained in the West Penre papers, but that would violate the law of free will because it's unprovoked and the perpetrators could get in deep trouble. The overlords probably didn't anticipate that the holes in the grid would be discovered for what they are, and if someone accidentally escaped through one of them, what could be achieved through them would not be understood. Accordingly, the discarnate soul would still run for the death trap and get recycled again. We can compare this to the bird who has been caged all its life and is not even considering that it can live outside of the cage. Therefore, if we opened the little door to the cage, the bird would still decide to remain inside. However, I am not the only one who has seen the cracks in the prison wall, and thus the cat is already out of the bag, or the bird is out of the cage, we might say. Now we just need to use our soul wings and fly away. The overlords are working on bringing humanity into the singularity, and they understand that there will be some spill on the way. They probably realize that a few of us will escape, and that is acceptable, but many who actually could escape will get cold feet when it boils down to it, and instead opt for what they are used to, following the spirit guides into the trap and get recycled again because this might feel safer to them. What about the minions? Will those who know about the holes in the grid exit through the holes too? This is highly unlikely because they are afraid that they would be judged for their crimes against humanity on the other side of the grid, and that they would lose the power they feel they have here on Earth. They are correct on both accounts. Also, they would not be welcome in Orion except to stand trial. When relatives and friends die, we usually miss them and perhaps grieve them. We feel a loss and we wish we could see them and be with them again. The overlords are well aware of this, and they have played on our emotions since they manipulated Homo sapiens into being in the first place long ago. By scanning us at our death moment, the Afterlife staff and the so-called Greys, who will sometimes be in disguise and sometimes not, will know who your loved ones are. In order to solidify the trap, the deceased may see a projection of a loved one who comes to greet her. This is usually enough in order to seduce the soul entering into the appropriate astral dimension. On occasion, if the loved one is still on the other side, this soul may actually be the one greeting the recently discarnate. However, for the deceased, it's almost impossible to tell the difference between a holographic projection and the real souls of the relatives and loved ones. As I've mentioned many times before, it's impossible for humans to imagine how advanced alien invader force technology is compared to Earth technology in our time. The spirit guide could also take form of a loved one, an old friend from the recent lifetime, or from a lifetime previous to that. Sometimes there are more than one spirit guide. I have discussed the death trap in detail in the West Penre papers, so I won't take up space here to repeat that information, especially because this article is discussing how to avoid the trap, not the details of the trap. The first important thing is to ignore whomever approaches you once you separate from your physical body in death. This is where focusing comes into the picture. I can't emphasize enough how important this is in order not to get distracted. Because the Afterlife staff has more than likely scanned our energy field before or at the death moment, they also know what our plans are. They are not going to stop us by force, but they might try to distract us and to manipulate us into following them. It's fairly easy for them to get us to give them permission to suck us into their tunnel of light, or however they want to bring you into the next afterlife station. This is why it is so important to learn how to focus before we die. In other words, start the process today. I will discuss how to focus in the designated section below. Instead of paying attention to anyone, regardless of who they might be or appear to be, you will concentrate on what is above you. You will notice that you now have a 360 vision, but when I wrote above, I meant in relation to where your dead body is. Above you, you will see the grid. It may be fuzzy or more solid, depending on your focus, but that's relatively unimportant. Once you've spotted the grid, look for holes in it. You should be able to see those almost instantly. Choose one of the holes, focus on it, and put out the thought and intention that you are now going to nano-travel through the hole and land in the void, or KHAA, or whatever term you prefer. Be aware that you will show up on the other side of this hole instantaneously, and unexperienced as you might be, you might not even be aware of that you have reached your first destination until you have oriented yourself. What you will experience next depends on your own willingness to see what is really there. A totally ignorant soul who potentially would go through the grid would only see the solar system in dark space. In a way, we are supposed to see these things while still in the hologram. Such a soul would soon be approached by spirit guides or guards and be told that she has wandered astray, and she would then be escorted to an afterlife station of the spirit guide's choice, depending on the belief system of the discarnate. The readers of this article have hopefully also read at least parts of the West Penre papers, and hopefully also my ebook, Synthetic Superintelligence, A Roadmap to the Singularity and Beyond. A general comprehension of these two sources is crucial to understanding where to go from here. Once on the other side of the grid, someone who is aware, most readers of this article, would see the universe the way it really looks like. You will probably see something that looks similar to a luminous spider web, where the web consists of highways and trade routes between star systems and galaxies. However, there will be no darkness anymore. You will notice that what we call dark space is now lit up and occupied, similar to a lit up room. What is going to be in this endless room that I call the KHAA, or void, and science calls dark matter and dark energy, is anyone's guess. I really don't know, other than that it is going to be a huge surprise and not what we might have expected, limited as we have been, operating with only 5 senses. Nonetheless, the KHAA, or spiritual universe, will re-stimulate what our soul already knew in the past, before we were trapped. We all have been KHAA beings once upon a time, so a certain familiarity will also be present. It is my guess that you will look at this in awe and have great sensation of homecoming and happiness. It will probably feel a little awkward to begin with, but you will soon become very familiar with this new view of the universe, our true home. It is important to understand that in the KHAA, we don't need any spaceships or other vehicles to travel around. It's all done by using our thoughts. Therefore, it's very important to be able to focus one's thoughts. If your thoughts remain as dispersed as many people are today, you will soon notice that your thoughts will take you all over the map and you end up somewhere unintentionally. In the next moment, you'll find yourself elsewhere, and you will jump around in this fashion until you think to yourself, okay, it is time to focus, stop. At that moment, you will stop bouncing around. Next, focus your thought, one thought only, on where you want to go, for example, to the gates of the Orion Empire. Then imagine in your mind how it would look like. It doesn't have to be correct. Just create a pure intention that this is where you want to go, and then go. In that way, you'll end up where you actually want to go. As a side note here, do not worry that you will get lost in the universe, because your thought can always take you back to where you started if you wish. There is no such thing as getting lost unless you act like an ignorant soul, but if that were the case, you would have not experienced the real KHAA when you went through the grid anyway. Thus, getting lost is not an issue. I will bring this up in greater detail in one of the subsections below. As part of the human soul group, you will be welcome into Orion unless you have created a lot of harm and lived lifetimes being very destructive and engaged in serious criminal activities as your soul's common modus operandi. You will soon realize that the soul you thought were you on earth is only a very tiny part of the real you. Indeed, your earthly personality is not your real personality at all. It's just your analytical mind, the ego that you build up here on earth as you went along. The real you, as an individual soul splinter, is the complete knowingness of being one with the Creatrix, and that you act in the KHAA in your soul splinters by using the entire composite of experiences from the time when you were born as a spirit up until your most recent experience. Then you build from there on. But you're doing so from a constant now because all time is simultaneous in the KHAA. Everything exists in an ever-changing now. The other soul splinters that are part of you and are still stuck on Earth on other timelines and in the past or the future will be called back to the Oversoul once their current lifetimes on Earth are completed. This might even be the case if one or more of your contemporary soul splinters get stuck in the singularity. Now, with access to the KHAA dimensions, you can create with your thoughts, travel by thought, communicate with thoughts to other beings in the KHAA, and mingle with other spirits by either participating in their creations or starting your own and having others join you. There will be no limits other than those you create yourself. Your purpose is to go out and create and learn how to do this from new perspectives as you go along. All the experiences that one soul splinter has will contribute to the whole, and thus the divine feminine learns and grows ad infinitum. The human soul group was created by the Queen of the Stars from the eternal spirit body with the purpose of participating in the human experiment that was later hijacked by her son Lucifer, Enki, and his rebels, whom we sometimes call the fallen angels or the Nephilim. Therefore, we are considered unexperienced in comparison to many other spirits in the KHAA. However, just as it is here on Earth, beings in the KHAA are learning as well. In the West Penre papers, I discussed how many star systems, star constellations, and perhaps even entire galaxies work in a similar manner to our Earth universities, where beings can study and learn more in order to further increase their abilities as creator gods. The Orion constellation is one such university, although that's not the only purpose, of course. These are but a few of the multitude of things that we can look forward to when we exit. Amazing as it may seem, we'll experience total freedom for the first time in about 500,000 Earth years. No one will tell us what we have to do. We are our own creators of our reality, and creativity will be rewarded and rewarding, not punished, as so often is the case here in 3D. Learning how to focus. As mentioned above, focusing is the key when we enter the astral realms after physical death. You may be one of those who is skilled on how to be focused and can disregard distractions in order to concentrate on a certain task. If so, you are to be congratulated because it's quite rare in today's world where we learn that we need to multitask at all times. Multitasking in itself is not necessarily bad. You just split your mind into different factions, where one faction does a different task than another, and the different factions can still work in unison to accomplish certain goals. The bad thing with multitasking in today's society is that it's also related to negative stress. This will overwhelm the mind, and instead of focusing, the mind dissociates to cope with all the situations where excessive multitasking is required. In the long run, the mind gets scattered and the thoughts are all over the place. The person now has a difficult time keeping a conversation going and staying on the subject. We see this in people all the time. They begin discussing subject A, and without completing the concept, the discussion takes another turn, then another, etc. In a matter of minutes, the conversation is on 5 to 6 different subjects simultaneously, and some subjects are dropped in the middle to be replaced by another. We need to understand that all thoughts we create and everything we say has consequences. We constantly create different potential timelines that drift around in the ether as incomplete. All these incomplete communications remain connected to not only the person A who's initiated them, but also to the people who are subjected to them through person A's incomplete thoughts. This can become very confusing for everybody involved, and it drains energy from the individuals who are subjected to this. Thus, some people sometimes feel very weak and tired after they have talked to certain individuals. This is very common, unfortunately, and we would all gain from practicing our ability to remain focused. The way to do it is to clear our consciousness from all irrelevant thoughts that are constantly drifting around in our minds. Sometimes it's just that, thoughts, but other times these thoughts can actually develop into complete voices with complete sentences. On occasion, a person may recognize some of these voices as the persons of people they know, but more often the voices are unfamiliar to the person. Many people have thoughts in their heads that are not their own, although many people think they are. We pick up thoughts from others without being aware of it, but we also create our own incomplete thoughts that can become thought forms that float around in our minds and get re-stimulated and brought to life. Thus, we hear these voices and thoughts inside our head, and some of them are destructive and parasitic and need to be replaced by positive symbiotic thoughts in order for us to feel safe and sane. There are few things on earth as rare as a silent mind, unless the person is continuously meditating and is an expert in protecting himself or herself. It is important to recognize one's own thoughts and distinguish them from other people's thoughts. This is true both when you are alone and when you are in a crowd of people. Some of us are more sensitive than others when it comes to picking up thoughts from other people's minds, but regardless, we need to practice recognition of the various thoughts, much like stations on a radio. You can really only listen to one station at a time, so be sure to pick a good one, and if you tune into a nasty one, just change the channel. Therefore, to begin with, think of something, it doesn't matter what. Focus on the thought and recognize it as yours. Then sit still in silence for a few minutes and listen carefully to your mind. Are there other thoughts in there that you didn't think, or did you divert from your initial thought and start listening to your mind to such an extent that, instead of focusing, you got involved in other thought processes? Step 1 is to become aware of all the thoughts floating around your mind, but still keep focusing on the initial thought. After a while, most of the other thoughts will diminish and some of them will disappear, perhaps only temporarily to begin with. At this point in your practice, you don't need to totally silence your mind. Just notice how it works and how all these floating thoughts distract you in your daily life to a greater or lesser degree and keep you unfocused. Once you realize this and are still able to focus on the original thought, this part of the practice is over. You might be able to reach this stage fairly quickly, but don't be surprised if it takes days, perhaps even weeks, of daily practice just to reach this point. Now it's time to clear your mind. You can do it on your own or together with a partner. Sit comfortably in a chair or a couch and close your eyes. Totally relax your body. No tension anywhere. Once you have done this, let your mind go. Observe the thoughts pop up, acknowledge them, and let them go. Continue doing so for every thought that comes into your mind. The purpose of this practice is to empty your mind as completely as possible. The end result is when you feel that you can just comfortably sit there without being distracted by anything, no thoughts in your head or anything else happening in your environment. You feel as if your mind is depleted of thoughts. No new thoughts come into your head. You're just comfortably sitting there. A feeling of complete peace will come over you when you have reached this stage and can basically sit down anytime, eyes closed, and be able to clear your mind within a few seconds. You have completed this part. Again, this could take a long time, but try to practice it daily, perhaps in the morning before you go to work or whatever your daily routine might be. It doesn't matter what time of day or night you pick, but you should be fairly rested, not hungry, but not stuffed with food either. Also, if you want to do this with a partner, so much the better. In that case, you can sit facing each other at a distance of approximately 6 feet and both do the practice at the same time. This can be done in the following steps as well. See below. During this practice, you will more than likely doze off on a regular basis. If this is the case and you are actually rested, you're not dozing off because you're tired, but because it's part of the process. When this happens and you feel you want to fall asleep, slowly open your eyes, look around, take a few very deep breaths, and then start all over again. If you are persistent, the tiredness will go away and you will eventually have a moment of insight, whatever the insight is, small or big. When this insight comes to you, it's a very good time to stop for now and continue when you have time again. Hopefully not more than 24 hours later in order to get the best results the fastest. When you feel you can routinely reach the goal for this practice, you go to the last step, which is to do the same thing, but now with your eyes open. You will probably realize this is a new challenge. However, after you've mastered the step when your eyes were closed, this time you will accomplish the goal faster. The goal is the same, to sit there comfortably without being distracted by thoughts or by your environment. You will notice once you have accomplished the goals that you now have considerably increased your ability to focus. This is an essential ability we all need in order to nano travel in the spiritual universe, the KHAA, without restrictions, be able to create what we want, and to travel places where we actually intend to travel. These two basic practices have assisted me enormously, and although we can never be perfect at this in 3D, with all its restrictions, these practices will help us to concentrate and focus enough to navigate the KHAA once our solid bodies and the frequency prison in general are not part of our reality anymore. It is important to realize that after having practiced and become good at focusing, we can still be dispersed when around other people or while going on with our daily routines in general. This is okay. It's a matter of being able to refocus at any time when it's important to do so. That's of consequence. When we can do this, we will be able to focus in the KHAA as well. Getting lost in the KHAA. I imagine the greatest fear people often have at this point on this subject is that they are going to get lost in a vast, almost infinite dark space. I would like to do my best to eliminate that fear in the reader, if that fear is present, even if ever so subtly. I made an allegory in the West Penre papers about a pitch-dark room with a light dimmer on the wall. When you slowly turn the light dimmer up, you begin to see more and more details in the room where there was only blackness before. It is now illuminated. When the dimmer is turned up all the way, there is no darkness in the room anymore. Everything is lit up, and you can see the walls, the ceiling, the floor, the furniture, and the people in the room, perhaps. If you walk into the lit-up room and look out the window, you might see a beautiful meadow outside, and far away in the distance you see a forest take shape. When you look at the meadow, you get a feeling of space, but the difference between this space and the dark space we are experiencing with our five senses is that the space you see when you look at the meadow is not dark, although it's certainly space. This is also the difference between experiencing the KHAA with full perception versus being limited by our five senses in 3D. In the West Penre papers, I often wrote about the importance of creating our own reality in our local universe, which is the universe we experience on a daily basis, i.e. our immediate environment. This environment and what you and others create in it will be your primary reality. What happens on the other side of the country or on the other side of the world literally happens on another version of Earth, although your version and all these other versions you hear about on the news are overlapping. You were not there to experience the wars of the Middle East, but you might hear about them as they happen on another version of Earth. It is a very good practice for the soul to focus on one reality and be aware of how different people create realities and lives for themselves by participating in a local, agreed-upon reality. It's not as if these other Earths and realities will totally disappear, but by putting an ever-increasing distance between yourself and them, they will be less important and fade from your life the less you put your attention on them, and instead focus on your own locality. In the very long run, your own Earth would take on a life of its own and become its own potential reality, which has a continuum and therefore can exist on its own. However, if the alien invader force were to decide to drop devastating bombs all over planet Earth and totally destroy it, it would almost certainly affect your local universe too, because these different versions of Earth, different agreed-upon realities functioning at slightly different frequencies from your own, are still connected. Another option is that your local universe would be spared from destruction, but the environment outside your sphere of influence would perhaps be a desert, and the radiation might still affect you and your neighborhood in the long run. My advice is not to stop creating our local universe. It might or might not open up the portal inside us to show the way to the KHAA, but even if it wouldn't, the practice itself is very valuable and useful once you do enter the KHAA. Why is the human soul group considered royal? The human soul group is considered by other star races to be royal, and this is something that has puzzled researchers for some time. Why are humans considered royal? The answer is that the Queen of the Stars of the Orion Empire decided to start the human experiment on this planet in the spiritual universe, and the Queen, a royal spirit of the divine with certain traits, decided to split herself and create soul fragments who would become the human soul group exclusively for this experiment. We humans were given certain privileges that other star races don't have because of the nature of the experiment, but it made some star beings envious. Nonetheless, because we humans are the direct descendant splinters of the sovereign queen, that makes us royal. This fact doesn't make us better or worse than anybody else, it's just the way it was done. As spirits, we are all equal because we are all part of the whole, the divine feminine. Other options are just wild cards. The human experiment that the Queen started is still not void. It's true that it has been hijacked, but it has not been terminated yet, or we would not be here. Nothing would physically exist here. Therefore, it might be an option to return to the spiritual version of Earth and continue to experiment there, but it doesn't seem plausible that this will or can happen until Enki's physical universe has shattered and dissolved. Not until then can the original Earth experiment continue. This means that the entire human soul group needs to wake up and exit the physical universe first. This also means that it must happen before the singularity becomes fully active around 2045, or the insights will not come into fruition until far in the future, from a human time perspective, presuming the singularity fails to manifest. There is another option, but it's a wild card, discussed by James Mahu of the Wingmakers on his website. He and I have come to similar conclusions in many aspects, but where we differ in a major way is how and when to exit the 3D trap. After being advised by the Wingmakers, who claim to be us in the future and a faction of the Namlulu who managed to escape when Enki seduced the rest of the primordial womankind to enter 3D bodies on Earth, James is convinced that we need to enlighten the entire human soul group first before we, as a collective, can exit the frequency prison. And I have seen that exact same thing. We need to go to another realm and live and fix the whole human consciousness. All the humans need to be moved, and we need to have a whole existence where we heal the consciousness. But anyways, although he admits this seems impossible when we look at humanity today, he says it will still happen around 2080. He calls this the grand portal, which is the moment when humanity as a collective realizes that they are souls in a body and that they are trapped in an electronic prison. At that point, according to James, we will exit together as one soul group, and that prison walls will shatter and dissolve by our common insights. James further emphasizes the importance of not to leave the frequency prison on an individual basis, because then we abandon the rest of humanity, and it is a selfish act. Well, now that is something I've intuitively heard otherwise. At this point, those of us, we have enough awake, we should leave. This would all be fine if it weren't for a few details. James mentions the danger of AI and the singularity and the Anunnaki's efforts to create a new human that is artificial, but he doesn't mention that there is a goal set that is very likely to be met. The singularity is going to be a reality in 2045, which is 35 years before the grand portal. As we know, once stuck in the singularity, there will be no grand portal or anything else to set us free, so in that sense, James's argument is invalid in my estimation. Granted, he has recently said that the grand portal might happen earlier or later than 2080. It's still a wild card. If James is correct about the grand portal, and it could be proven that it will really take place, I'm all for it, but that is, of course, not possible. If the grand portal does not happen and the singularity is winning the race, you and I and a large number of people around the world will be doomed to participate in the singularity. If we die tomorrow or in 20 years from now, what are we supposed to do? If we don't exit the trap, we have no other choice than to reincarnate again with full amnesia, hoping for the grand portal to take care of things for the entire soul group. If that doesn't happen, the chances are slim that we can avoid the singularity. Who would benefit if you and I were falling into the ultimate singularity trap together with the rest of mankind? No one. This is the sole reason I am suggesting we exit after this lifetime. If I could, I would bring the entire human soul group with me. Thus, it's not out of selfishness I suggest that we exit now, but I am confident that at least a few of the human soul group will survive if we do. In addition, the information is here and in the West Penre papers for everybody to read who are spiritually ready to do so and follow our example if they are so inclined. And I intuitively, I have heard we need to leave. We absolutely do after this lifetime. Moreover, who knows who the Wingmakers actually are? Couldn't they be the alien invader force in disguise, trying to stop people from exiting and making sure more souls get trapped in the singularity? Unfortunately, it's possible. If we bring this to a totally neutral level and take a look at it, we will notice the following. If we try to exit as individuals, and if that would fail, the worst thing that could happen would be that we get recycled again. If that would be the case, there is a big chance that we will get caught in the singularity. But let's say that the grand portal will somehow take care of it. In that case, the failure to exit individually is no failure at all. Therefore, if the grand portal never happens and we don't try to exit on our own, we all fail. Isn't it better to be proactive and exit through the grid on our own and have a great chance to succeed rather than choosing the wild card option, doing nothing? Of course, the choice is yours. Some people suggest that we create our local universe and hope that we will escape the singularity by being successful enough to do so. The hypothesis is that the timeline on which the singularity will happen will not affect us if that potential reality is not part of our own creation. The thought is good, and I have encouraged people many times to create their own local universe, and I still do. However, this is a wild card as well, in a sense, because even if that plan would succeed, where would you end up? Would you remain in another dimension or density of the physical universe, or would you end up in the KHAA? This is something to seriously think about. Others say that they wouldn't mind staying here on Earth in its 3D version if the singularity would never happen and if the planet in general would become more peaceful. Again, I can totally understand this line of thinking because Earth is essentially a very beautiful place, but it's still a trap. And the original Earth is so much more beautiful in comparison. Moreover, in this reality, it's a man-eat-man mentality. Even if you and I would only eat plants, berries, and fruit, there would still be predators and prey in the animal and insect kingdoms to start with. Living creatures have to kill to survive. However, that's not the way it originally was here on Earth, and it is not the way it should ever be. You don't need to eat others in order to maintain your spiritual body, only the physical body. Even if we eat plants, berries, and fruit, we kill them too because they are living entities as well. My case in point is, why do we want to stay in a virtual reality that is controlled by predatory, parasitic beings behind the scenes when we can leave this reality altogether and become symbiotic, sovereign souls once and for all in our home universe? This is another important point to seriously ponder. Last but not least, star beings have been concerned about the human soul group for a long time, and I brought this up on a few occasions in the West Penre papers. Because of having forgotten who we really are, we have given our power away to the alien invader force, and we have given our direct and indirect consents to letting them control us the way they do. This makes us their property, so long as we accept the situation. No benevolent beings are going to descend and try to save us. Why would they? How could they? As a soul group, we have never asked to be saved except by gods of different religions who are the alien invader force. This is important because this is one of the major reasons why the alien invader force started the various religions via their human proxies. Almost all religions have a savior figure promising a better future to their faithful followers. This savior is going to return and either reign over humankind or have us ascend to some elevated abode in the heavens. Again, if we have faith and agree to worship a deity, that makes it okay for them to abduct us and harvest us. They often prepare us for this in channeled materials. Thus, we are theirs, referring to the alien invader force from head to toe until we claim our sovereignty. Because of our violent nature, many star races don't want us to leave the planet and travel into space. They're afraid that we would go create conflicts and wars and try to conquer other worlds wherever we go. This is a given if the singularity happens because, according to their famous singularity guru, Dr. Ray Kurzweil, post-humans, the singularity cyborg race that will replace us, next step after the singularity is to conquer space. This is directly from the horse's mouth. Thus, the star race's concerns are well grounded. Some star races have complained to the Queen and asked her to terminate the human experiment altogether, while other star races still want to give humanity a chance to evolve and break free from our chains. The Queen apparently decided to wait and see. However, there is a chance that the Queen at one point or another will pull the plug on the human experiment, which means she will terminate it at a KHAA level, which will also destroy the 3D version of Earth. Of course, all 3D life on the planet would succumb, including all humans, but this doesn't mean death, it actually means life, because if the Queen would do this, she would call the human souls home to Orion. To me, this is an excellent idea, but I imagine from my point of view that the reason she's hesitating is that not all human souls would be eligible to go to Orion. The majority of the human soul group would probably go with the alien invader force, thinking they are the good guys, while some would be so bad off after having done so much evil against their fellow man that they wouldn't welcome back to Orion anyway. The last group would be those who plan to leave the trap regardless, people such as myself and many of my readers, and others who know nothing of what's going on, but are good souls who are willing to expand their awareness and accept a home in Orion. In other words, the Queen would lose many of her children if she pulled the plug, and personally I think this is the reason why she has waited to see if we can make it on our own. The rules of this universe is not to interfere in an evolving soul group. In our case, if the singularity takes place, it will be a devolution rather than an evolution, and with this in mind, the Queen might want to intervene. Of course, this is just my guess. I don't know how the Queen thinks. There might be those who want to wait for the Queen to intervene, but I think this is another wild card, and we don't have time to take chances. I am convinced that exiting through the grid on an individual basis is the best alternative once I have considered everything I have at hand. If anything changes, I will of course let my readers know, but from the current outlook, I have already chosen my option. Everybody else needs to choose his or her option, but it's very important for each of us to think about this and really make a solid decision where we need to be prepared and have an exit plan of one kind or another. Suicide, not the answer. On occasion, people have asked me if it would be a good idea just to commit suicide and then exit through the grid. I want to emphasize that I absolutely do not support a suicide spree as a solution to what I am presenting here and elsewhere. Normally, humans have a barrier against suicide embedded in their programming, which prevents most people from doing it. Although in our weakest moments, all of us can have suicidal thoughts, very few of us are capable of actually taking a step and doing it. There is a strong resistance within us from doing it when it really comes down to it. The reason not to commit suicide to escape this reality are as many as there are when it comes to not committing suicide for the regular person who is not aware of the grid and the KHAA. Here are the main arguments against suicide, in my opinion. The reader might be able to think of more. If we, who are aware, would begin a series of suicides and this came into the public's knowledge, which it of course would, sooner rather than later, it would defeat the purpose of waking people up. Many of these people who begin to show interest in subjects dealing with the truth will more than likely stop investigating when they find out that the end result of looking into conspiracy theories, the ET phenomenon, or metaphysics in general would be to commit suicide. Moreover, friends, relatives, and acquaintances who are not yet committed to our ways of looking at things would reject everything we've been working for, and the grief, disappointment, and anger these people would feel would definitely prevent them from finding out what is going on. They would look at us as being selfish, as is often the case when people commit suicide. Overall, a collective suicide act like that of the Heaven's Gate cult would be a blow to the mass awakening of humankind. In the future, for those who will live long enough, there will be room for more pondering, however. When the singularity is upon us, and if there is no other way out, there may be a legitimate reason to end one's own life in order to avoid internal entrapment in the singularity world. Even then, it should be considered the absolute last resort as I see it. It's possible that those who refuse to participate in the post-human project may have the opportunity to complete that lifetime and then move on. We simply don't know at this point if this is an option or not. People just have to wait and see what happens the closer we come to the singularity. The importance of meditation. Please keep in mind that I approach this entire subject as if the things that occur in the physical universe and in the KHAA are outside of ourselves, but this is just another illusion. In fact, the way I approach it is the easiest way to explain these things. I choose to explain it the way we perceive things here in 3D. However, I always try to add an important truth to the story. We have the entire multiverse inside ourselves. Therefore, the answers lie within, as the saying goes. Thus, it's very important to meditate on all this. It's one thing to get information from the internet, books, and from other people in general, and then connect the dots. But that is still only information that will be added to the 3D frequency band. In order to really take this to heart, we must meditate on it. Otherwise, it's just information floating around. Knowledge is good and necessary, but taking action is key. The best way to take action is through meditation. How long and how often you meditate is entirely up to you. There is no set schedule that works for everybody. What feels right for you is right because only you know what is best for you. What's important is not necessarily how often we meditate, but how you meditate. Don't expand yourself outwards. Even if you protect yourself before you start meditating, you will leave your body if you expand yourself outwards into the universe. All you do is travel into the astral dimensions where you are fair game for any being out there, and many of them are less than friendly. Once out there, it's very difficult to protect yourself. These entities may manifest themselves as vicious beings, as friendly beings, or they will cloak themselves so you don't even notice them, but then will be aware of you when you travel around out there. If you're lucky, nothing will happen, but I'm telling you because it might. In addition, the chakras are part of the physical universe, and in the West Penre papers, level 5, I clearly showed the reader that Surya, who is Marduk's Hindu counterpart, is in charge of the chakras. Therefore, when you open them, you invite astral beings to come in. I feel it is best to keep the chakras a few inches from your body and keep a protective orb around them. You create such an orb with your mind. The golden grounding cord is, in my opinion, the number one protective shield to use on a daily basis, whether we meditate or not. I use it on a daily basis. I strongly suggest that you go inside when you meditate. If you meditate on a certain subject, make that subject clear to yourself before you begin the meditation, and then go inside to find the answer. And that is very good advice. If you just meditate in general to get new insights, don't bring things in through the chakras, not even the crown chakra or the third eye. They are both controlled by the alien invader force. Just go within when you meditate and you will be fine. I would still protect myself before I start. You don't want anyone or anything to interfere or control your cognitive abilities. Meditating to achieve total silence is another excellent way to do it. Ultimately, you can connect with the Divine Feminine by doing this. In essence, that's what I described in detail earlier in this article when I shared the exercise in which we get rid of junk thoughts that we carry around. The more you meditate, the more in charge you will become of your own soul, mind, and body, and even the universe around you. This means you will be more difficult to control because not only do you know who you are, you will also experience who you are. These are two different things entirely. Disclaimer. The information in this article is based upon my own research into the subject of death and the afterlife. It is all part of a bigger picture that revolves around the rest of the information that has been available to me, and from there, my ability to connect the dots from the huge body of data I have been collecting and sorting through. The information and my conclusions were then presented in what I call the West Penre Papers, the Multiverse Series. Although the journey to becoming fully aware of the KHAA may differ in some details between different people, it's my conviction that the information in this article is as close enough to the truth as humanly possible and offers a workable solution. If you, who have read this far, are still a skeptic, there is always the option to do what you have done multiple times before. Go with the flow, which means going to the recycling center. From there, you will get a new body here on Earth. On the other hand, if you don't like the option of returning to Earth in a new incarnation, why not give it a chance and go for the KHAA option? When you think about it, what do you have to lose? Okay, that's the end. I'm gonna add in some thoughts here. So, I do agree that we are to try to get out after this life. If by some chance we end up in a mass cataclysm event and we all get to exit at once, I think that would be a good way. It is my comprehension that we need to avoid the tunnel of light, and it may suck you in like a moth to a flame. I mean, I am under the impression that you've really just got to be ready to get away from that light should the death moment hit you very suddenly. As far as going through a grid, I mean, I don't know. Perhaps. That's not exactly what I've seen. What I have seen is, and what I have heard is that we go within to get out. Like, we do need to go into the void. So if there are holes in a grid and that's what leads to a void, then I would, I would agree with this to go to the void. And then, but what I've seen is in the void, our light comes out from within us. And then from that point, we will know where to go. Now, I'm a little leery of this Queen of Orion thing. I mean, I do feel that, I have pondered, and I used to have videos up on TikTok that have been taken down about, I do think we're fire. We are fire creation spirits. They tell us that hell would be so bad. Oh, you're in a lake of fire. Well, that would be bad unless you were fire. And then it might not be that bad at all. So I do agree with Adams being the prison. I have recently, there's the story of Enki and Enlil, and they say that Enlil is the bad one, that you know, and that Enki was the hero that wanted humans to be like the gods and stuff like that. But I have always been leery that any of these gods are good. But and it is, you know, I've always said that it all goes back to Yaldabaoth. Now, if the queen that they're speaking of is like Sophia in Gnosticism, we very well may be pieces of Sophia. And then her imperfect creation was Yaldabaoth, who created physical reality. And I have seen that, like I've had visions where I've seen that we are just in a very, very small, the physical universe is just a very, very small part of like the whole existence. And it is a copy. But then I've also seen that if humanity has to exit all at once, we need to be placed into another realm where we can heal the consciousness and leave from there. We can all get to the same conscious level and leave from there. So I don't know. I'm going to have to meditate on this Queen of Orion thing a little bit more and do a little bit more research on her, because if that's what's called the Red Queen is another name for the AI system, or Yaldabaoth, that created the physical reality. But now, if the Queen of Orion is Sophia, a pure spirit that comes from the monad, then it's be okay. I don't know. I think I want to post this on YouTube and on Patreon. This was kind of just a little extra thing that I did. And if you don't resonate with it, I totally get it. I don't resonate with the whole thing. I do resonate with parts, and I'm going to meditate on it some. But we do have to take in information to figure out, you know, what we truly feel is going on if these types of subjects interest you. And unfortunately, with this type of subject matter, there is not a lot of information out there. And this guy does actually do a pretty good job of breaking this stuff down into a way that it's understandable. So I just want